You know what I love? Commuting. That awesome feeling of doing the same journey over and over again with absolutely zero variation. Since the dawn of gaming, we've had boss fights, from Bowser and Mario to Eridan in The Witcher 3. However, something that not all of them contain is what has been dubbed the boss run. Basically, this is where you don't respawn right back at the boss when giving it another attempt. Rather, retrying the boss involves some sort of journey to face them again. This has been used in a bunch of games over the years, but is mostly known as being a part of the games made by From Software. So Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Sekiro, etc. And I, for one, can't stand them. Which begs the question, do we even need them in the first place? So join me today as we answer, how do we solve the boss run problem? To start off, let's dissect why boss runs even exist in the first place. The first possible reason is simply because the way FromSoft designs their levels means the boss room is always situated right at the end of a particular area and far away from the nearest respawn point. So kind of like a Legend of Zelda dungeon where the boss is always the last room you go to, which in theory makes sense. You want that sense of progression with a hard challenge at the end of every area as some sort of exam to pass into the next. And whilst yes, in Zelda, if you fail the boss, you do start back up right at the beginning of the dungeon, you almost always unlock a shortcut that leads right to the boss from the first room. Think the giant mouth into Duango's cavern, meaning the boss runs are always super short and never feel frustrating. The second possible reason is because from what I can read from Dark Souls forum posts, the general fan consensus is that boss runs are designed to be some sort of punishment for losing to the boss, meaning the long run back is an incentive not to lose. For me, this doesn't work for two reasons. One, because you are already punished for dying by losing all your souls. And two, because giving the player tedium as a punishment is one of the worst forms of difficulty I can think of. Look, I like difficult games. I tend to play most things on hard because I enjoy the challenge in testing myself. But boss runs are not tests of skill, they are tests of patience. This leads me on beautifully to what I dislike about boss runs. Drink every time I say boss run in this video. At a baseline, the problem I have isn't with boss runs themselves, but how egregious and bullshit some of them are. If it's something like the run back to spawn of Ogdo in Jedi Survivor, then it's only mildly annoying. The run is less than 30 seconds from spawning to facing him again, and whilst there are some enemies, they're only weak droids that are easily dispatched. And to be honest, it's kind of nice to take out your frustration on these little shits after Ogdo kills you for the 6 billionth time and makes you hurl the controller out the fucking window. So really, there's nothing I'd change about it. Compare that to the first major boss in Dark Souls 3, Vault of the Boreal Valley. If you take the shortest route and sprint past all the enemies, you can get from the respawn point to the boss in about a minute. That's if you remember to send the lift back up every time you die, or you have to wait for it, which will add another 10ish seconds to your run back. Why these don't reset to the default position after you die absolutely baffles me and seems to be done just to annoy you. And speaking of annoying, yes, you can run back in only a minute, but along the way you have to deal with multiple sets of enemies, including ones who jump out at you from behind walls like they're in the fucking Epstein files. It's pretty difficult to not get hit by at least one of these twats and go into the boss having already taken some damage. And most likely you're attempting these bosses multiple times, so if a boss with a similar length run takes you 15 attempts to defeat, that's at least 15 minutes of running through the same length of game map over and over and over and over and over again. Let's take a look at a boss that did take me a bunch of attempts to complete, and one that still visits me in my nightmares, the Crystal Sage. Jesus Christ, on a bicycle, this boss run is annoying. Not only is it about the same length as Vault, but you also have multiple enemies placed directly in your path in tight corridors, meaning you can't just rush through it and basically have to kill them each time. There's even this mega gank room at the end where like 6 dickheads come jumping at you with knives, as well as some sorcerers that shoot spells at you. I don't think I ever did this boss run without receiving at least some damage. And so I've got to ask, why is this in the game? What do we gain from having to make these runs again every time? Rather than just having a spawn point right next to the boss so we can face them again instantly and not have to run back through fucking Epstein Island each time. I'm not seeing or experiencing anything new, and the enemies or level don't change each time. So all the game is doing is frankly wasting my time, making me replay the same session of gameplay over and over and over again for no real reason. Skyrim wouldn't be made better by making me run back through the whole of Bleak Falls Barrow again with all the enemies respawned if I died to the Draugr at the end. A lot of the way I think about these things comes from the fact that I did 4 years of game design at university. Not saying that makes me an authority on game design at all. I mean, Jesus, you should see some of the utter tat that I submitted for my assignments. But when I'm trying to dissect game mechanics, I basically just imagine having a lecturer over my shoulder asking me why this mechanic is in the game. And I know that if I was making some kind of RPG and I had a boss run that was over 30 seconds long, their first question would be, why the hell does it take so long to get back to the boss? What purpose does this serve to the gameplay loop? And I know I would have no answer to it because it basically doesn't serve any other purpose other than just introducing artificial difficulty. And before I get any comments, I just want to make it very clear that I do like Dark Souls 3 and think it is a good game. But no game is perfect, and FromSoft is just as open to mechanic critique as any other studio. And yes, I do have a very short attention span. If you want to find out why, then click here. Let's imagine a scenario. You're playing Hitman World of Assassination. You're having a great time, you're throwing Jared Leto off a roof, but then suddenly you get caught and gunned down by some nearby guards. In the normal version, you just reload your save and try again. However, in the brand new FromSoft version of Hitman, every time you lose a level, you now have to escape from a brand new prison level. It's not very big, but there are a few guards you have to sneak past. Once you get it down, you can rush it in about a minute or so. Wait, what do you mean that sounds super boring and annoying? No, you don't get it. You're being punished for dying. That's generally how I see these long boss runs. Just these irritating little things that force you to replay the same section of gameplay endlessly like you're on a bloody time loop. Which actually, now I think about it, reminds me of another game that annoyed me by forcing me to replay the same bits over and over again. If you've watched my first ever video, you'll know that I really wanted to play The Outer Wilds for a long time, but couldn't due to a variety of reasons. Quick spoiler warning, because I will be explaining the basic premise of the game, so leave now or be eternally damned with spoiler anxiety. Well, I'm happy to announce that since that video came out, I have indeed now played The Outer Wilds. And by played it, I mean I played it for about 3 or so hours and then never touched it again. I'm sorry, I really wanted to love it, but I really just couldn't get into it. Look, nobody's more disappointed than me. Time loops are like my favourite subgenre ever, and I watch basically just about anything with one in it. So when I saw that there was a game with one in it, I thought I was definitely going to love it. But it really just didn't work for me, and here's why and how it relates to boss runs. If you're not familiar, The Outer Wilds presents itself as a sci-fi exploration game. However, like 20-ish minutes after you set off to explore the solar system, the sun explodes and kills you, causing you to wake up back where you started before you set off. So your task is to relive this time loop over and over again until you can find a way to stop the sun from going kaboom. Now in theory, this is an awesome setup that I think is really cool. However, in practice, I find this just completely ruins exploration and brings the same problem as Dark Souls. Pointless repetitive journeys. See, if I'm exploring one specific area and then the reset happens, I'm just going to go back and keep exploring that same area. So ultimately, the reset didn't do anything other than waste my time for 1 or 2 minutes whilst I take my ship back over to the location I was exploring. It kind of feels like you're playing through a dungeon in Skyrim. You're having fun exploring, but every 20 minutes you get teleported back to Whiterun. So you then got to make the journey back to the dungeon again before you can keep exploring. I never felt the time loop mechanic added anything, and it just became frustrating for me very fast because I'd been enjoying exploring, I'd be getting immersed, and then bam, hard cut back to the start and all my fun grinds to a halt whilst I have to fly back to the same location again. Look, I'm sure the time loop mechanic makes the game feel a lot better later on as you explore more and start getting deeper into the mystery. And I know there must be a reason why so many people consider this game a modern masterpiece. But as a first time player, all I could feel was frustration and annoyance as my flow state was constantly interrupted and it just made me not want to play anymore. Similar to how in Dark Souls, I'd be trying to get into the groove of defeating the boss, ready to give it another attempt, but oh wait, I've got to sit through this minute-long gangfest again. It just kills the fun for me. It's just a system I really didn't enjoy, because like Dark Souls, I just felt like I was wasting my time. Here's a little tip for any game devs out there. Please, 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 please stop ruining your games with artificial difficulty. It's a term I used earlier, but let's go a bit deeper into it. The challenge in video games should come from a level of skill being either similar or slightly below the level of skill required to progress. This is a very basic concept. So as the game goes on, your level of skill and the required level of skill should be relatively close to each other. It's okay to have the required level of skill jump up occasionally. This might be something like a boss fight, where you need to give it a few tries to build up your level of skill to overcome the challenge. But the challenge of any game should almost always come from your lack of skill. Something like a boss run I would describe as artificial difficulty, where it's not designed to be a test of your skill for you to overcome and get better at the game from, as there's only so good you can get at running down a corridor and sprinting past some enemies. It's simply designed to be hard for the sake of being hard, and it's a design I can't stand. The real test of skill is learning the boss fight and finally overcoming it. There is nothing rewarding about running past the same set of enemies 15 times. You might as well just swim me back outside the boss room with a 1 minute cooldown before I can face it again, as that is essentially the exact same thing. And at least it'll give me a chance to get a refill of my Gamer Girl bathwater. So how do we fix this? How do we fix the boss run problem? Do we get rid of boss runs completely and just have you always respawn right outside the boss's arena? Do we add in some kind of variation so it's not the exact same thing every single time? Do we change the saving system so we can save whenever and wherever we want, such as in games like Skyrim or The Witcher 3? Well, turns out, From Software already asked this question themselves. As if you played their 2 most recent games, that being Sekiro and Elden Ring, you'll know that boss runs have been almost entirely taken out. Most bosses now have respawn points right next to them, allowing rematches almost instantly, effectively eliminating boss runs entirely. And this seems to be an almost universally loved change from what I've seen online. Gone are the days of having to sprint past 6 heavily armoured blokes with 6 more giant fire-breathing lizards that absolutely shred your health and they can also hit you through the fog wall. Oh god, dear god, I'm remembering Dark Souls 2! So what's the lesson here? This video kind of needs a point other than just, this thing was bad but now it's fixed. Your takeaway should be that mechanics don't need to stay in games if they're actively detracting from the gameplay experience, just because they're a staple of the series. Like Skyrim removing Oblivion's awful level up system, or GTA 5 finally letting you flip cars back over. We don't need to get stuck in this mindset of, oh, the game's always been like that, so why change it now? Games should adapt and change over time. And yes, that means shedding old mechanics and design ideas that don't work anymore. If you just make the same game over and over again, you get shit like Madden and FIFA. Games that refuse to move into the future just stack these problems even further on top of each other each time, until eventually, it just has to collapse. Thank you so much for watching today's video. The response to the last video was a lot bigger than I thought, and there are in fact a lot of you, there's about a third more of you now here than there were this last time I made a video. So I hope you enjoyed this news video, and welcome to you all to the channel. I hope you stick around, I hope you enjoy. If you're interested in watching more of my content, then click here to check out my video on video game hunger bars, and click here to check out my video on the red barrel theory. My name is Nosemasher, thank you for listening to me, and have a wonderful day.